Flux core or solid wire, which one would work best in your shop at home? When I say flux core, I don't want to get that confused with dual shield or inner shield, which are also flux cored wires, but they do require a shielding gas. I'm referring to the E71T GS, which is a gasless wire. It is self-shielding, and if you stick around, I'll tell you the story how I got this machine practically for free. So before we go much further, let me explain a little bit what flux cored wire is. Flux cord is a tubular wire. It contains a flux on the inside of the wire. So the shielding that it gets from oxygen out in the air is from the flux itself as it burns. It does not require any type of shielding gas. Advantages to that process is you don't need any shielding gas. You don't need to lease a bottle. All you need is the wire. And there's a few things we need to discuss when switching over to a flux cord wire. The most common mistake that I see when I'm talking to someone, or even if I go to someone's house and they're showing me their machine and how it doesn't work well, is usually they're on the wrong polarity. Remember, for flux cord wire, you want to run electro negative, and usually different machines have different ways of switching that around. I got a couple of machines here and I'll show you how we do it. So like on the 255 here, obviously I will set my process, so I would put self-shielding flux cord wire, and to reverse polarities, I basically undo these dense connections and I'm just gonna switch them around. This little Miller 211, I'm gonna set it to a flux cord wire, but I also have to switch polarity. And this one is 2 screws, 2 bolts, 2 nuts I should say, that you unscrew, and you'll switch your wires around to get electro negative for flux cord wire. While both of those machines are dual, so I can either run flux cord wire or I can run a shielding gas, the reason that you want to select flux cord on either machine is it turns off the solenoid that engages whenever you are using solid wire. So that way it doesn't engage the solenoid, it's not needed. Another common thing also is we've got V-groove rollers and we've got knurled rollers. Whenever you're on your flux cord wires, remember it's a tube, so it's a little softer. You can grab a flux cord wire and bend it and break it, right? We don't want that slipping. So if you use a V-drive roller with a flux cord wire, it's gonna slip, and the way people try to compensate for that is they over tighten their feed roller, and it ends up crushing the wire. If you use a knurled roller, that allows you not to put tension on your wire, and it gives it something to grab onto that tube with and feed it through your setup. And here's an example. You can see the difference between the knurled roller and just a smooth V-groove roller. Before I set up the machines, and I'm gonna do a weld with each process and kind of show you the difference, I do want to tell you the story of how I picked up this machine practically for free. So what happened was a buddy of mine called me and said, man, this machine, this flux cord stuff doesn't work. He didn't want to go with a shielding gas. Went out to his place and noticed right away he was on electrode positive. We switched everything around, put it together, it welded just fine. He didn't like flux core mainly because of all the spatter and all the fumes that it produced inside of his shop. So he was unhappy with that process, and he said, man, if you want this machine, just take it. We'll exchange it later down the road. Maybe I'll need some welding or something like that. So check that out. If you get a buddy that calls you and says, hey, I'm having a hard time with this welding machine. I'm running flux cord wire and it just isn't welding right. Check that polarity and check the rollers, because that's usually a good start at some problems with this process. I got 030 wire, and on these machines here, these small machines, I'll show you. So it comes with a knurled roller there, if you can see that knurled roller. So we're gonna make sure that we get this cleaned up, and we're gonna make sure that we put it on the knurled roller for flux cord wire. I'm gonna grab a wrench, switch over my polarity. Now that I've got the nuts taken off, I'm gonna take my wires and switch them around. We're gonna put the electrode on the negative, and we're gonna put the ground on the positive. Just make sure those are nice and snug, and we're almost ready. We need to take this off here because I'm just gonna run this little sample spool So we'll take this off, run this small spool. Just pull this adapter off here and allow me to put this, this small spool on. You just want to put enough tension on this spring to where it'll still roll out, but it won't keep spinning. So just enough pressure on there to hold that thing from spinning out of control. And making sure we're on the knurled roller, we'll just go ahead and run our wire and get it into our liner. Once we get it into our liner, we'll just close it down. And I usually run, depending, there's a way to see just how hard your wire is pushing, but usually between 2 and 3 is usually a good setting to try in the beginning. And we'll go ahead and run our wire. So we've ran our wire through. We'll go ahead and put the tip on. And remember, we don't need shielding gas. So I've made sure that my shielding gas is off. I've also made sure that my polarity has been switched around, Electro Negative. Once my tip is on, there's also a shielding cone that you'll normally run with gas. In this process, you don't need this cone. I'm gonna put it on because I do not have the rubber. There is a cone that you can put over here because you don't want spatter and things to get inside of here and clog up your ports. So if you're looking for that, you can buy those and just protect your tip here. I'm just gonna put this shield back on. It's not necessary because we're not running gas, but we'll run it here. I went ahead and I'm just gonna go 11 gauge. Just no shielding gas. We're gonna set her around 4 and 60, and let's see how that runs. We're all set up for a gasless flux cord wire. I've got a piece of scrap metal here. I'm gonna run a small bead. I want you to just listen to it. I want you to notice all the fumes, and I want you to notice how bright the light is. Then I'm gonna switch polarities, do it the wrong way, and we'll do the same thing. And then we'll run over there and we'll do solid wire. And that way you got a comparison to the different processes and how if you have your polarity hooked up the wrong way. So there you go. As you can see, spatter. You got all the flux that you have to chip off of it. I'm gonna go ahead and run another bead so you can hear it. And again, when you run it this way, you can see how bright the light is. You can see all the fumes that are put into your shop, and you have slag over the top of your weld. And that slag needs to be wire brushed off or cleaned off. And all I'm doing here, guys, is a simple drag. Now that we have that, I'm gonna go ahead and switch polarities to electrode positive, and you'll see the difference. So you saw how I welded electrode negative, which is the correct way to run flux cord wire, no gas shielding, right? I went ahead and switched it over to electrode positive, and I'm gonna run the same bead. Remember, I'm just dragging a bead along here, no manipulation whatsoever. And we can see if there's a difference in the sound and what you're hearing basically. I mean, I wanna show you, if this is what you're getting, when you're welding with flux cord wire, and I know a lot of people struggle with that, check your polarity. I mean, it won't weld. It will not weld. Now let's go compare it to solid wire on the other machine, and you'll see the difference. I'm on the other machine. This is set up with solid wire. We're shielding with C25, which is 75% argon, 25% CO2. It's solid wire, so I'm gonna push this right along. No manipulation, and I want you to hear the difference and notice the brightness of the light and notice the amount of fume. And again, that's the difference there. Remember, there's no manipulation here. I'm just running it right across. You can see how much cleaner the weld looks. It's definitely not as hot as your flux cord wires are. Less fumes, just something nice to use inside of a fabrication shop. So any of you out there running flux cord gasless wires, just something to look at. I find using flux cord out on the farm, outside is usually the best application for it. It really does well for farm machinery repairs and things like that. If you have a good fume extraction system in your shop, you can run it inside your shop. Maybe you got a really tall shop. Each process has its place. If you're running flux cord at home, some things to check. Remember, Electro Negative for your flux cord wire, and make sure you're using a knurled roller. Don't crush your wire with a smooth roller. So I know we didn't get in depth into welding techniques or anything like that, but I hope this information was valuable and maybe can help you in your shop if you're running flux cord wire. Again, we'd appreciate it if you followed us. We like sharing information like this in our small fabrication shop, and maybe, who knows, maybe that information can help you out one day.